Hello, BookTube. Deb came over today, so I had a chance to go out and do some errands, which largely took the form of meeting with old friends on Beacon Hill. And there was, of course, lots of book talk. and and because I can't leave the house without it happening, there was also book acquisition. I also came back with a bag load of books. So I thought I'd show them to you. It's a very mixed assortment here, including, starting with this thing here. This is by Frederick Reb Samen. It's just a verse translation of Beowulf. I've never heard of it before. Never heard of him before. It's got the old English line breaks, and I, I'm all. I mean, these things were mine for the walking away with. So I'm always up to read a new translation of Beowulf. So there you go. I've got one. This next one I vaguely remember when it came out, but I never read it. It's called Cold: Adventures in the World's Frozen Places, by Bill Streever, in which he just goes. This was 20 years ago, I think. He just goes to all the world's frozen places, the Arctic and the Antarctic. This is 2009, and as you can tell from the monster on the cover, he meets with a lot of the wildlife that has been adapted for tens of thousands of years to live in those conditions. And he meets a lot of the people, and if I remember the summaries of it correctly from back in 2009, it's heavy on the popular natural history. So you're not just told what animals live where, you're also told about their life, and I love that sort of thing. I don't think I read it. I'm not 100% sure. Once I dip into it, I'll remember instantly. But 2009 would have put it in the ambit of Open Letters Monthly when I was seeing catalogs with a new eye because I was back in reviewing. So there's a chance. I don't think I ever wrote a review of it, one way or another. The next one is a murder mystery for March Mystery Madness. This is Death on a Vineyard Beach. It's by Philip Craig, and it's one of his series of murder mysteries set on Martha's Vineyard, which I never know the breakdown of my readership. It's a large island off the coast of Massachusetts that has a particular charm. There's Cape Cod, and then which is the actual coast of Massachusetts, and then there's Martha's Vineyard, which is a big island. Now it's covered in super resorts and mansions and whatnot. It has a long history, and it's a wonderful history. It's a wonderful place to visit. And then much further out on the open ocean, there's the island of Nantucket, which has a special place in my heart, and which for a long time was not civilized at all. And this one stars an ex-cop named J.W. Jackson. For ex-cop J.W. Jackson, a vineyard summer spent honeymooning with the fetching Z. Medeiros is as good as life gets. But when Z and J.W. treat themselves to a matinee performance of the opera Carmen in Boston, a hooded figure with a sawed-off shotgun cuts their idyll short. J.W., reacting just in time, foils the attempted murder of an aging former gangster. And then the gangster, he lives a reclusive life on Cape Cod, or on Martha's Vineyard, and he enlists our two heroes to help him with who would want to kill him and who might still succeed in killing him. And I must have read this when it first came out because I love this series. This came out in 1996. But I'd be happy to reread it. And it brings up an interesting. I'm going to be making. I've been remiss in my March Mystery Madness videos, but I'm going to be making a video or two upcoming on a couple of key elements in murder mysteries, and one of them is location. A big one is location. That has been true right from the beginning, although it wasn't on Arthur Conan Doyle's mind. Nevertheless, he made the fog enshrouded streets of Victorian England and 221B Baker Street into a location on its own that has been now aped by a million people. But Craig does a pretty good job of evoking some aspects of the vineyard. So, and then the next one is a book that I never actually read. So I'm looking forward to it. This is Ian Banks' Dead Air in a beautiful, I believe this is a UK edition. And it's his, well, I don't know that much about it. I I haven't read it, and I've had lots of people who have read it tell me you really have to. I've had a couple of people tell me, people who are much bigger fans of his than I am, tell me that this is his best book. It's his 9/11 novel, written in a white heat right after. I can't wait to get to it. I may bump this to the front of the queue. This is let me see the description here. The description on the back is kind of weird, which leads me to think this is not an American production, because American productions spell everything out. They don't have, I don't have any faith in it. A couple of ice cubes first, then the apple that really started it all. A loft apartment in London's East End, cool but doomed. Demolition and redevelopment slated for the following week. Ken Knott, a devoutly contrarian leftist shock jock, attending a midweek wedding lunch, starts dropping stuff off the roof towards the deserted car parked 100 feet below. Other guests join in, and soon half the contents of the flat are following the fruit towards the pitted tarmac, just as mobiles start to ring, and the apartment's remaining TV is turned on because apparently a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center. I'm going to give this a try. This is very intriguing. I don't know what it was doing in an apartment building on Beacon Hill, but that's a whole other subject, is the mysterious journey that books take to get to us. This next one's in beautiful condition. This is this had to be a long time ago. Yeah, 1995, and yet in lovely condition. This is an annotated scholarly selection from the Diary of John Evelyn. That is our gorgeous author as a young man on the cover, and he was a contemporary and friend of Samuel Pepys and Christopher Wren and a whole bunch of other people, founding member of the Royal Society, and kept a diary. And it's a very different kind of diary than Pepys kept. Very different. Amazingly, an amazing read, almost as enjoyable as Pepys, but in a very different way. I myself think that Pepys wrote his diary for general consumption. He wrote it in a kind of code that a 4-year-old child could break. But I get the impression when I read it that he was expecting. I don't think he was at all thinking that his would be the only eyes who would ever read those pages. Whereas with Evelyn, you do get that impression, even though probably the reality is reversed in those cases. But this has like, for instance, let me show you. It has entries and then footnotes for that. It just pulls all of the highlights out of his. And I have a selection of Evelyn's diaries in a little Oxford World Classics mass market paperback, but it's, I believe, a different edition. So have a different introduction, different notes, different selections. And this coming Monday is John Evelyn's birthday. So I will gladly gobble up a lot of this on Monday just to mark the occasion. The next one is the hardcover of a book that I love. I read it when it first came out. God, when was that? 1990s somewhere. 2001. And it's The Scarlet Professor by Barry Worth. It's the story of Newton Arvin, who was a mid-century intellectual and biographer of Melville and Hawthorne. A wonderful, oh boy, if you ever see his biographies. He did one for Longfellow, one for Hawthorne, one for Melville, and they read fantastic. What a writer he was. And he was also a teacher, well-respected, beloved by his students. And at one point in his career, the police raided his apartment and found a small collection of relatively mild gay pornography. And it ruined his life. It completely ruined his life. He survived it, but he withdrew from public life until he died. And you can't read his story without thinking how times have changed. That would have been nothing if it had happened in 2018. It would have been almost nothing. You would have expected him almost to publicize it. But I remember I read this when it first came out, and I loved the job that Barry Worth does, and it's really the definitive book on Newton Arvin. And it made me very happy. I was working at a bookstore at the time. It made me very happy that the small handful of customers who would come to my information desk and say, I have a clipping here, or it was excerpted in the New Yorker too, really good excerpt. A lot of people came to me and said, I've never heard of this guy. Is this book any good? And are his books any good? And it was very pleasing to be able to say, yeah, this is the sympathetic historical treatment that Newton Arvin has always needed. And his own books are incredible. I don't have any of them. None of them are in print. But, you can go to the Brattle Bookshop in Boston, and I'm sure you can find one or two if you're persistent. And I always told those customers, of course, what you will see coming, which is that I'd be happy to get it for them, too, if they want me to. So I was very happy to have it, because I have no idea what happened to my original copy. And then the next one, the next two, we're going to finish up with biographies here. The next one is by John Gillingham. This is in the Yale British Monarch series. This is Richard the Lionheart. Richard I, son of King Henry II. And this is what the Yale series does so well. It's just a really smart, completely comprehensive synthesis of all the latest scholarship. This replaced a Richard I biography from decades before, if not more, maybe a century before. So I was happy to see it. I mean, I don't have any biographies of Richard. I have one book that's a dual biography of him and his brother John, but that's it. So, and I love the Yale series. The smartness of the editorial team just goes on from generation to generation, so the books are always really good. And then the last one is a presidential biography, and I already have a copy, but mine the dust jacket was badly faded in the sun, so I had to go over all the letters in a pen just so you could read it from a distance. And then I saw this thing sitting there. It's in perfect condition. It's bright as the day is long, so I'm just going to swap out my old edition for this. This is Francis Russell, The Shadow of Blooming Grove, a big political biography of Warren Harding by a wonderful man. A bit of a pedant, but a fantastic writer whose house on Cape Cod was open to everybody. If you came by and told him, I've got an interest in history, I've got an interest in reading, or, God forbid, I've read one of your articles or one of your books, you'd be invited to supper. You'd be invited to sit on the porch and talk books until the sun went down. He's delightful. And if you spent time with his name is Francis Russell, so I didn't give you his name. If you spent time with him, you would get an idea of the kind of book that he could write. And this would surprise you, because this is deeply, finely detailed political history of not only Harding, but everybody connected with him. And it's just fantastic reading. So just fantastic. Certainly the best book on Harding that's ever likely to be written. And there it was. So I just grabbed it. So we've got 3 biographies. We've got Warren Harding, Richard the Lionheart, and Newton Arvin. How's that for a trio? Then John Evelyn's Diaries in a new scholarly edition that I didn't have. Dead Air, Ian Banks' 9/11 novel. Death on a Vineyard Beach. Location murder mystery. Cold, about the world's coldest places, all of which are significantly warmer now than they were when this book was written. And a tiny little paperback translation of Beowulf, a translation of Beowulf that I've never read. So there you go. A totally unguessable book haul, but I couldn't turn any of these things down, so I plugged them back here. So that's it for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.